He's not dead. He's not dead. He's alive. He's not dead. Those 3 words shattered the solemn hush of the marble courtyard like a thunderclap in a silent storm. My 7-year-old savior, Joy Williams's voice echoed across the sea of black-clad mourners, all clustered around what was meant to be my eternal bed. I can still feel the muffled echoes, the gasps rippling like waves, the frozen stares, the way the world seemed to hold its breath as if fate itself had paused. Because in that instant, that little girl did what no adult dared. She spoke the impossible truth that would rewrite my ending. But let me pull the curtain back. Let me explain how I ended up here, trapped in a golden casket at my own funeral, my heart still beating against the odds. Before I dive deeper into this tale, I need you to lean in close. If you're watching this, promise me you'll stick with every twist. Turn the page, absorb the details, and maybe even share your thoughts on how one child's whisper can defy death. Trust me, the revelations ahead will make you question everything about life, luck, and the unseen bonds that save us. Now, let me guide you back to the roots of it all. My name is Eddie Watson, and if you'd told me 3 years ago that I'd wind up sealed in a coffin at my own send-off, I'd have chuckled right in your face. My existence was flawless, or so I convinced myself. I grew up in Silicon Valley as the sole heir to Victor Watson, a visionary tycoon who clawed his way from garage tinkerer to tech empire builder. My father began with a single prototype circuit board and forged it into Watson Innovations, one of the globe's premier AI conglomerates. We commanded algorithms, data centers, smart systems, you name it. If it processed information or predicted the future, we owned the code. Raised amid such opulence, you might assume I was entitled. And perhaps in fleeting moments I was. But my father instilled in me a principle that would one day pull me back from the brink. He taught me to honor every soul, regardless of their station. Eddie, he'd say, the person who polishes your flaws might be the one who saves your life someday. Never forget that everyone counts. I saw him live it out. He memorized the names of every worker, from the C-suite strategists to the night shift custodians who buffed our halls. He'd show up at their family milestones, dispatch care packages during tough times, and always regarded them as kin. That wisdom embedded itself in me. Even with fortunes at my fingertips, I held fast to the truth that compassion is free and transforms everything. I was 40 when I first crossed paths with Mary Williams. Lord, even recalling her arrival now stirs a quiet gratitude in me. But back then, she was everything I needed without knowing it, resilient, unassuming, with a quiet strength that could steady any chaos. She appeared at my estate's doorstep during a hiring round, a recent widow seeking stability for herself and her young daughter. I was in the midst of expanding the household staff, buried in late-night mergers and the isolation of command. I remember her standing in the grand foyer, resume in hand, her eyes steady despite the weariness etched in her features. "You seem like someone who values hard work over fanfare," I said, scanning her references. She nodded with a faint smile. "Life's taught me to keep moving, Mr. Watson, and to appreciate kindness when it's given." Something in her voice resonated, a shared understanding of loss, perhaps. I hired her on the spot as live-in maid, assigning her the servant quarters with room for her girl, Joy. From the start, Mary was impeccable, cooking meals that warmed the empty halls, cleaning with a care that made the place feel lived in rather than sterile. And Joy, that bright-eyed child, brought a spark I'd long forgotten. I'd catch glimpses of her sketching in the gardens, her curiosity boundless. Subtly, I began small gestures. A box of books and treats at Christmas, a teddy bear when she fell ill. Mary never asked for more, but I sensed her quiet appreciation. My sister had her doubts, eyeing the arrangement with suspicion during rare visits. "You're too soft on the help, Eddie," she'd warn. But I waved it off. After all, what harm in a little humanity? Little did I know, those seeds of kindness were planting the roots of my salvation. Looking back now, from the clarity of survival, I see how isolated my world had become long before that fateful collapse. The Watson estate wasn't just a home. It was a fortress of solitude, perched high on the hills overlooking the sprawling tech hubs of Silicon Valley. Picture it. Towering walls of tempered glass that caught the sun like diamonds, reflecting the world outside while keeping it at arm's length. The gardens were a masterpiece of precision, manicured lawns rolling out like emerald carpets, dotted with imported olive trees and fountains that whispered secrets to no one. Roses climbed trellises in perfect symmetry, their blooms a riot of color against the sterile white stone paths. But for all its beauty, the place echoed with emptiness. The silence was expensive, as Mary once put it in one of her rare, offhand comments, guarded by invisible barriers of wealth and status. I could stand at those floor-to-ceiling windows, staring down at the city lights twinkling like distant stars, and feel utterly alone. Success had built this empire, but it had also hollowed me out. My days blurred into a relentless rhythm, a cycle of power plays and projections that left little room for anything real. I'd wake before dawn in my master suite, a cavernous room with automated shades that peeled back at the touch of a button, revealing the first blush of sunrise over the bay. Coffee in hand, black and scalding, I'd dive into the first high-stakes call of the day. Investors from Tokyo or London, their voices crackling over encrypted lines, demanding updates on our latest AI breakthroughs. "Eddie, the neural nets are outperforming projections by 15%. My CTO would report, and I'd nod, even though no one could see me, pushing for more. Always more. Board meetings followed, virtual holograms of suits flickering in my conference room, debating mergers that could swallow competitors whole. I'd pace the polished oak floors, my mind a whirlwind of algorithms and acquisitions, sealing deals worth billions with a single signature. But beneath the triumph, there was this gnawing void. Success tasted like ash, endless accolades in Forbes, TED Talks where I preached innovation as salvation, yet nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was all there was. And then there was my sister, Elena. God, where to even start with her? We shared the same blood, but little else. At 45, 2 years my senior, she lived in a penthouse in Manhattan, flitting between galas and boardrooms of her own making. Elena had always been the ambitious one, the shark in designer heels who saw family ties as leverage. Our relationship had frayed after Dad's death a decade ago, when the will split the empire unevenly. Me at the helm of Watson Innovations, her with a hefty trust fund but no real control. She'd resented it ever since, her calls laced with veiled barbs. "You're burying yourself in that glass tomb, Eddie," she'd say during our quarterly check-ins, her voice dripping with false concern. "Let me help streamline things, cut the dead weight." I knew what she meant. The extravagances, like generous staff benefits, or my quiet philanthropies. Greedy? Perhaps. Distant? Absolutely. She visited rarely, and when she did, it was to probe for weaknesses, her eyes scanning the estate like a predator assessing territory. Rumors swirled in the industry grapevine, whispers that she was cozying up to our rivals, feeding them intel on our vulnerabilities. I dismissed them as paranoia at first, but stress has a way of amplifying shadows. Speaking of stress, that was my secret unraveling. No one knew about the episodes, not even Elena. They'd started a year back, these quiet storms in my chest, racing heart, dizziness, a fog that descended like a curtain. Doctors called it anxiety-induced arrhythmia. Nothing fatal, they assured, but enough to prescribe sedatives for the worst nights. "Take them sparingly, Mr. Watson," my private physician warned, handing over the discreet bottle. "They're strong, could knock you out cold if you're not careful." I nodded, stashing them in my study drawer, a last resort for those endless calls that bled into the wee hours. Corporate rivals didn't help. The tech world was a battlefield, with upstarts like Nexus AI nipping at our heels, spreading rumors of our outdated models. I'd hear echoes in boardrooms. "They're plotting a takeover, Eddie. Watch your back." It all piled on, layer by layer, until I felt like I was carrying the weight of the empire alone. In the midst of this, my thoughts often drifted to Mary and Joy, those quiet anchors in the storm. I didn't interact with them much, kept things professional, but I'd catch glimpses through the estate's security feeds or during my rare walks through the halls. Mary's mornings, as I pieced them together from her reports and my own observations, were a stark contrast to mine. She'd rise even earlier, in that modest room tucked away in the servant quarters, a cozy space I'd had renovated with a small kitchenette and play area for Joy. I'd see her in my mind's eye, slipping into her uniform, a simple blue dress that hung loose on her frame, worn from years of labor. 30 years old, but life had etched lines around her eyes, making her seem wiser, more weathered. Widowed at 25, she'd told me during her interview. Her husband, a construction worker, gone in a freak accident, leaving her with a toddler and mounting bills. She'd bounced between jobs, scraping by in cramped apartments, until a mutual contact mentioned my opening. "I'm not one for pity, Mr. Watson," she'd said then, chin high. "But I'm grateful for the chance to build something stable for my girl." And build she did. Her routine was poetry in motion. Starting with the kitchens, mop in hand, the soft swish of water across marble floors mingling with her quiet humming. Old gospel tunes, I think, carrying faint echoes of hope. She'd pause to prepare Joy's breakfast. Simple things like oatmeal with fresh fruit from the estate's orchard, all while the child chattered away. Joy! Ah, that little firecracker. Even in my recollections, she stands out like a burst of sunlight in the estate's muted grandeur. At 7, she was all wide eyes and boundless curiosity, her dark curls often escaping a hasty ponytail. I'd find her sketches scattered sometimes, left behind in the gardens or on a bench near the fountains. Crude but vibrant drawings. The glass towers as castles, the fountains as magical springs, even stick-figure versions of me, tall and alone at a window. "Mr. Watson looks sad," she'd scribbled once in wobbly letters. It hit me harder than any boardroom loss. And those whispers of hers. Mary mentioned them in passing during staff updates, chuckling it off as imagination. "Joy says she feels people's feelings, sir," like whispers in her heart. I'd smile politely, but something about it lingered. Once, when Joy was sick with a fever, I'd sent the teddy bear, anonymously, of course, and later overheard her telling Mary, "He cares, Mama." I can feel it, like a warm light. Empathic, intuitive. Whatever you call it, the girl had a gift for seeing through walls, literal and otherwise. It made me wonder if my own loneliness was broadcasting louder than I realized. That final morning crept up like any other, but with an undercurrent of fatigue I couldn't shake. I'd been up late, fielding a crisis call from our European division. Another rival maneuver, whispers of a patent theft that had my pulse hammering. I reached for the sedatives, popping one more than usual, washing it down with scotch to dull the edge. "Just to steady things," I muttered to the empty study, its walls lined with books I'd never read and screens flickering with stock tickers. The room spun gently as I leaned back in my leather chair, the estate's silence pressing in. My vision blurred, chest tightening. Not the usual episode, but something deeper, colder. I fumbled for the phone, but my fingers went numb. The world tilted, and I collapsed forward onto the desk, papers scattering like fallen leaves. What followed was a blur, pieced together later from reports and hazy memories. Staff found me hours later. No pulse, no breath, skin cool to the touch. Paramedics rushed in, their voices a distant hum. "Stroke, likely. He's gone." Doctors confirmed it at the hospital, attributing it to a sudden cardiac event. The allergic reaction to the sedatives? Buried in the haste, overlooked in the chaos. Headlines exploded by midday. Tech titan Eddie Watson dead at 43. Empire in turmoil. The city buzzed, stocks plummeted, rivals no doubt toasting in secret. Elena arrived like a storm, demanding control, while the estate staff mourned in whispers. And all the while, in that suspended limbo, my heart ticked on faintly, waiting for a child's voice to call it back. The haze that followed my collapse wasn't darkness, not exactly. It was more like drifting through a fog-shrouded sea, where sounds pierced the mist in fragments, disjointed echoes that teased at the edges of consciousness. I remember the paramedics' urgent chatter first, their voices muffled as if underwater. No vitals. Time of death, 2:47 a.m. Hands prodding my chest, cold instruments against my skin, the wail of sirens fading into a distant hum. Then, the sterile beep of hospital machines, doctors murmuring over clipboards. Catastrophic stroke. Brain activity minimal. The family's been notified. Elena's sharp tone cut through next, barking orders on her phone. "Get the lawyers here now. We need to secure the assets before the vultures circle." Her heels clicked on the tile floor, pacing like a caged animal. I wanted to scream, to tell them I was still here, trapped in this shell, but my body betrayed me, frozen silent, a prisoner in my own flesh. The sedatives had plunged me into this abyss, my allergic reaction turning a simple dose into a near-fatal shutdown. Suspended animation, they'd call it later, but in those moments, it felt like eternity's waiting room. 2 days. That's how long I lingered in that twilight, the world spinning on without me. Headlines blared my demise across every screen. Billionaire Eddie Watson succumbs to stroke at 43. Legacy in question. Stocks tumbled. Condolences poured in from rivals who no doubt hid smirks behind their sympathy. Back at the estate, preparations for my funeral ramped up like a well-oiled machine. From the snippets that filtered into my haze, nurses gossiping, Elena's calls overheard, it was a spectacle in the making. Staff buzzed through the halls, transforming the courtyard into a stage for mourning. White roses by the truckload, imported from some exclusive grower in the Netherlands, blanketing the grounds in pristine petals. The golden casket, custom-ordered, engraved with subtle AI motifs, arrived under guard, its gleam a mocking reminder of the fortune I'd amassed. Whispers among the help reached me in fevered dreams. He left it all to the company, I bet. No kids, no wife, what a waste. Elena's already sniffing around the will. Says she'll streamline stuff. God help us. Their voices carried a mix of grief and fear, loyalty clashing with self-preservation. Paparazzi swarmed the gates like locusts, drones buzzing overhead for illicit shots, turning my death into tabloid fodder. Watson's final farewell, billions up for grabs, screamed one outlet. Elena fueled it, her haste transparent. She'd flown in overnight, commandeering my study, rifling through drawers with lawyers in tow. We can't delay, she'd insist. The board needs stability. Stability, my foot. It was control she craved, her greed a shadow I'd ignored for too long. In the midst of this chaos, my mind clung to warmer fragments. Memories of Mary and joy, those quiet lights in my isolated world. I'd always kept my kindnesses anonymous, a habit born from Dad's teachings. Give without fanfare, let actions speak. Flashbacks surfaced in the haze, vivid as dreams. That first Christmas after hiring Mary, I'd assembled a box myself, late at night in the kitchen, away from prying eyes. Books for joy, colorful picture stories about far-off adventures, the kind that sparked imagination in a child confined to servant quarters. Non-perishables for Mary, gourmet teas, artisanal chocolates, things to ease the grind of her days. I'd slipped it outside their door with a simple note. For the holidays. No signature. Mary's thank you came indirectly. A fresh-baked pie left in my fridge with a scribbled appreciated. It became tradition. Boxes each year, escalating subtly. Art supplies for Joy's sketches. A voucher for online courses Mary mentioned in passing. Beyond them, I'd funneled anonymous donations to her old community. A rundown shelter in the city's underbelly where she'd volunteered before widowhood. Thousands wired through shells, funding renovations, meals for the needy. Someone cares, Mary had told a colleague once, overheard on the estate's audio logs. Feels like a guardian angel. Little did she know it was me, compensating for my own emotional voids. Those gestures weren't charity. They were lifelines, reminders that humanity bridged the chasms wealth created. But even in my comatose drift, I sensed a pull, a faint, insistent thread tugging at my awareness. It was joy, though I couldn't name it then. Her unease had been building since the news broke, her child's intuition a beacon in the storm. I pieced it together later from Mary's accounts, but in the haze, it manifested as whispers, like echoes in my mind. "Mr. Watson isn't gone yet." Joy's voice, small and trembling, filtering through the void. Back in their quarters, the mother-daughter bond played out like a quiet drama. Mary, ever the pillar, had held Joy close that first night, the child's tears soaking her uniform. "He's with the angels now, baby," Mary soothed, her own voice cracking. Widowed young, she'd mastered resilience, turning grief into action, channeling it into mopping floors and folding linens with mechanical precision. But joy was her soft spot, the vibrant core that kept her going. Their bond was unbreakable. Mornings of shared breakfasts, evenings of stories under a single lamp. Joy's questions about the world met with Mary's patient wisdom. "Why does the big house feel empty, Mama?" Joy would ask, and Mary would smile sadly. "Some folks have everything but what's inside." Yet Joy's insistence gnawed at her. "No, Mama," the girl whispered that morning after my death, clutching her sketch pad like a talisman. "I heard him calling." He said, "Don't let them close the box." Mary's hand froze on the mop handle, the estate's silence amplifying her doubt. Imagination, she told herself, Joy's way of coping, her empathetic heart spinning tales. But something in those wide eyes, brimming with tears, planted a seed of unease. Mary had seen Joy's whispers before, sensing a staff member's sadness before it showed, drawing pictures that mirrored unspoken moods. "You feel things deep, don't you?" Mary would say, hugging her tight. Still, she dismissed it gently. "Hush now, Joy. We have to respect what's happened." As the funeral loomed, tension coiled tighter. Joy's unease crescendoed into something palpable. A vision, if you will, though I hesitate to call it supernatural. It was more like an attunement, her sensitive soul picking up my faint, lingering pulse like a radio signal through static. That second day, as preparations peaked, Joy tugged at Mary's sleeve in the kitchen, eyes urgent. "Mama, we have to go. They'll bury him alive." Mary's heart pounded, worry etching her brow. "Joy, don't say that. It's not right." But the child's conviction shook her. "But Mama, he's not gone. I can feel it." A nagging doubt bloomed in Mary. Memories of my kindnesses flashing. The teddy bear during Joy's fever. The boxes that arrived like clockwork. What if? She tried to calm Joy with a hug, but the girl's trembling voice echoed her own unspoken fears. Staff were dismissed after setup, the courtyard filling with black cars snaking up the drive. Mourners, media, Elena at the helm. Mary watched from the window, black attire blending with the shadows, her mop forgotten. Joy, ever the slip of energy, wriggled from her grasp in a blink. "Joy, wait!" Mary called, but the child was gone, darting toward the courtyard, her bare feet silent on the stone paths. The service was beginning, hymns rising like a dirge, and in my haze, that faint thread pulled taut, Joy's intuition racing to meet my silent call. From my suspended vantage in that velvet-lined prison, the funeral unfolded like a lavish theatre production, every detail scripted for maximum spectacle. The Watson estate's courtyard had been transformed overnight, a testament to Elena's efficiency, or impatience. White roses cascaded everywhere, their petals forming intricate arches and borders, sourced from elite florists who charged fortunes for fragility. The air hung heavy with their scent, cloying and artificial, masking the undercurrent of opportunism. At the center loomed the golden casket, its surface polished to a mirror sheen, reflecting the morning sun in blinding flashes. It was obscene, really, a monument to excess, engraved with subtle motifs of circuit boards and neural webs, as if my life could be summed up in tech iconography. A choir, clad in somber robes, filled the air with low, resonant hymns, old spirituals arranged for strings and voices, echoing off the glass walls like a requiem for a king. Mourners trickled in, a who's who of the elite. Business tycoons in tailored suits, their faces etched with calculated grief. Celebrities I'd rubbed shoulders with at galas, dabbing eyes for the cameras, board members whispering stock projections behind programs. Paparazzi hovered at the gates, lenses glinting like predatory eyes, while drones were swatted down by security. It was the kind of send-off only billions could buy, but in my internal haze, I sensed the rot beneath, hypocrisy thick as the rose perfume. They weren't mourning me, Eddie Watson, the man who'd clawed from code to empire. No, they grieved the opportunities lost, the deals unstruck, the fortunes untapped. Such a loss to the industry. I imagined them murmuring, their thoughts on inheritance and mergers, not the quiet soul who'd built it all. The officiant took his place at the podium, a silver-haired minister I'd never met. Hired for his gravitas, no doubt, his voice booming through hidden speakers. We gather today to honor Edward Victor Watson, a visionary whose innovations touched the world. He droned on, scripted eulogies laced with platitudes, his hand gesturing dramatically over the casket. Nearby, guards patrolled the edges, burly men in dark suits, earpieces buzzing with updates, their eyes scanning for disruptions. One, a veteran named Reyes whom I'd trusted for years, shifted uneasily, as if sensing the farce. And then there was the doctor in the crowd, a skeptical figure I'd later learn was Dr. Harlan, an old acquaintance from medical conferences, invited out of courtesy, his brow furrowed in professional doubt. He stood amid the tycoons, arms crossed, whispering to a companion. Declared too quickly, if you ask me. These high-profile cases. In my haze, their presence is registered as faint pulses, actors in a drama I couldn't direct. As the proceedings crept forward, my mind, trapped but restless, slipped into flashbacks, the haze parting like fog to reveal the loneliness that had defined me. I'd always been the architect of my isolation, building walls higher than the estate's glass towers. Relationships? They'd come and gone like failed prototypes, each one crumbling under my avoidance of vulnerability. There was Sophia, the journalist I'd dated in my 30s, fiery, insightful, pushing me to open up. "You're a fortress, Eddie," she'd said one night, her hand on my chest during a rare moment of intimacy. We'd met at a tech summit, sparks flying over debates on AI ethics. For a while, it worked. Dinners in hidden bistros, weekends escaping to coastal retreats. But when she pressed for more, commitment, emotions laid bare, I retreated. Work comes first, I'd claim, burying myself in code late into the nights. She left after a year, her parting words a sting. You'll die alone in that empire of yours. Prophetic, almost. Before her, there was Marcus, a brief fling in my 20s. Artistic, free-spirited, challenging my structured world. We'd connected at an underground gallery, his paintings mirroring the chaos I suppressed. But vulnerability terrified me. Sharing my fears of failure, the weight of Dad's legacy? No, I armored up, ending it before it deepened. Regret gnawed now, in this limbo. Regret for not building deeper connections, for letting success eclipse the human. I'd poured energy into the company, mentoring young coders anonymously, but personally, I was a ghost, haunting my own life. Everyone counts, Dad had preached, yet I'd forgotten to count myself. Parallel to this internal unraveling, I sensed Mary's anxiety rippling through the estate like a countercurrent. In my haze, it came as fragmented impressions, her voice calling softly, footsteps echoing in the halls. She'd been dismissed with the staff after setup, retreating to the kitchens to oversee final touches. But Joy's escape had shattered her calm. Joy, where are you, baby? Mary's whispers carried an edge of panic, her resilient facade cracking. I pictured her weaving through the back corridors, uniform disheveled, eyes darting among the lingering help, caterers stacking chairs, gardeners clipping stray roses. Her bond with Joy was her anchor, forged in the fires of loss. As a young widow, she'd clung to her daughter like a lifeline, their small world and the quarters a bastion against the estate's vast indifference. But now doubt festered. That nagging seed Joy had planted, blooming into full worry. What if she's right? Mary might have thought, pausing by a window to scan the courtyard. The black cars lined the drive like a funeral procession of limousines, disgorging more mourners. Elena stepping out first, her designer veil a shield for ambition. Mary's heart would race, memories of my kindnesses flashing. Those anonymous boxes, the stability I'd provided. She pushed through the staff lounge, questioning a maid. "Have you seen my girl? Small yellow dress." Anxiety twisted her features, a mother's instinct overriding protocol. Joy was everything, the color in her grey routine, the reason she hummed through chores. Losing her, even momentarily, in this sea of strangers? Unthinkable. Meanwhile, the faint thread in my haze grew stronger, pulling me toward the surface. It was Joy, navigating the edges of the crowd with the stealth of a shadow. Barefoot in her faded yellow dress, a stark contrast to the black sea around her, she squeezed through legs and skirts, tears carving paths down her cheeks. Her small chest heaved, heart pounding not just with fear, but with an inexplicable connection, a subtle empathic sensitivity, like tuning into a hidden frequency. She'd always felt things deeply. The staff's hidden sorrows, Mary's quiet burdens, even my distant loneliness in passing glimpses. Now, it honed in on me, that golden casket drawing her like a magnet. "He's breathing," she might have whispered to herself, the words bubbling up from that inner whisper. Inside her, it felt like another's heartbeat syncing with hers, faint, urgent, calling, "Don't let them close the box." The choir's hymn swelled, mourners shifting in their seats, Elena at the podium preparing her tearful speech on legacy. Joy inched closer, her wide eyes fixed on the coffin, the man who'd once slipped her a teddy bear during fevered nights. The officiant raised his hand, mid-sentence in a prayer. "And so we commit his body to the earth, ashes to ashes. They said you don't hear anything after you die." They lied. Even in that box darkness, I could still hear the world moving above me. Faint, distorted, like sound echoing underwater. The low hum of voices. The soft scrape of shoes. The priest's voice, solemn and steady, reading words meant to seal me away from the living. I wasn't supposed to be conscious. I wasn't supposed to feel. But I did. Every second. Every muffled prayer. My body felt far away, like it belonged to someone else. But my mind refused to go quietly. I wanted to scream. To pound on the lid. To tell them I was still here. But the air was thin, the sedatives still fogging my veins. My heart fluttered, shallow and erratic, like a bird trapped in glass. Then it happened. A sound split through everything. Sharp, pure, unmissable. "Stop!" A child's voice. The silence that followed was absolute. Even from inside that coffin, I could feel the stillness in the room, the shift in air pressure as hundreds of heads turned. The voice came again, trembling but fierce. "He's not dead." For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. Maybe my brain was firing off memories, my mind's last trick before fading. But then I heard it again, closer, louder, as if she was right above me. "He's breathing. He's breathing." Joy. Even through layers of wood and silk, I knew that voice. I'd know it anywhere. The small girl with too much courage and too little fear. The child who used to draw pictures of angels with my company's logo on their wings. The one who'd once told me, "You look lonely even when you smile." And now she was screaming for me to live. My chest convulsed. Once. Twice. A painful gasp tore through my lungs. Air. Cold, burning air. My ribs strained. My heart kicked again, weak but defiant. I heard movement, chaos, chairs scraping, voices rising. Someone crying out my name. Footsteps rushing closer. Through the confusion, Joy's voice cut clear as glass. "There. He moved. He's trying to come back." The world tilted. Somewhere, someone shouted, "Get that child away." Elena's voice. Cold. Sharp. She was always in control, even at my funeral. But not now. Joy refused to stop. "Don't touch him," she screamed. "He promised me he'd visit when I got better. He never breaks promises." My mind flickered, light flaring through memory. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet fear. Joy had been so small in that bed, skin pale, eyes too old for her age. I remember standing awkwardly by the window, the rain streaking down behind me as machines hummed beside her. "You brought me a gift?" she had asked weakly, her voice barely a whisper. "Sort of," I'd said, pulling the bag from my coat. Out came a little teddy bear, wearing a miniature suit and tie. I'd bought it from a shop near the hospital after a long day of board meetings, thinking it looked ridiculous. But when I saw her eyes light up, I realized it was perfect. "He's soft," she'd said, clutching it. "So's kindness," I'd replied without thinking. She'd smiled, the kind of smile that made the world look less cruel. "Then you must be soft too," she said. I laughed. "Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation." That laughter echoed now, merging with her voice in the present, panicked, pleading. "Please breathe," she whispered above me. Please, Uncle Eddie. Something inside me, something primal, clawed its way toward her sound. I tried to move my fingers. They twitched. Barely. But it was enough to send lightning through my veins. Then another sound, closer this time, a woman's gasp. Mary's voice. Her mother. Oh my God, did you hear that? Yes, Mary. You heard it. I'm here. I'm fighting. The world above me erupted. People shouting. Chairs toppling. Someone praying. Another recording. The muffled clicks of cameras echoed through the casket lid like gunfire. Then a man's voice, urgent, familiar. Dr. Patel. Everyone step back. Step back, please. The thud of footsteps drew near. I could picture him kneeling, pressing his stethoscope to the casket, his skeptical frown deepening. And then silence. Then his voice, cracked with disbelief. Dear God, he's alive. Alive. That single word detonated through me. Alive. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. Alive. Like a rope thrown into black water. I reached for it, clung to it. The noise swelled again, gasps, cries, sobs. Elena's voice trembled. That's not possible. He was gone. Dr. Patel barked. Open it. Now. I wanted to help them. To sit up. To prove it. But my limbs were still locked in a fog of sedatives and suffocation. All I could do was wait, listen, as metal tools scraped against wood, as hinges creaked, as light seeped in through the first sliver of the opening. A rush of cold air flooded my face. I inhaled greedily, choking on oxygen and tears. The light was blinding. The room spun in gold and white. I blinked up at faces, pale, wide-eyed, trembling. The ceiling chandeliers blurred into halos. And then I saw her, Joy, standing between two guards, her cheeks wet, her small hand pressed over her heart, clutching something. The same teddy bear. Mr. Watson, Jr. The bear I gave her. She was whispering. He kept his promise. The doctor's hands were on me now, checking pulse, breathing, vitals. His voice shook. He's breathing. Pulse is weak, but he's there. Call emergency response, now. A paramedic's radio crackled somewhere in the background. Another voice shouted, Make way. Clear the path. And then the wave hit. Cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions, the roar of disbelief and wonder colliding. I caught snippets of words. Miracle, resurrection, billionaire wakes at own funeral. If I'd had the strength, I might have laughed. Instead, a tear slipped down the side of my face. I'd spent years surrounded by noise. Corporate chaos, media storms, stock tickers. But nothing compared to the sound of one child's belief cutting through death itself. As they lifted me from the casket, I tried to turn my head toward Joy. My lips trembled, a whisper escaping. Or maybe it was just breath. Thank you. Everything blurred after that. Sirens, rushing air, bright lights. My mind floated between consciousness and dreams. I remember catching glimpses. Mary holding Joy tightly. Elena standing rigid like marble as cameras swarmed her. The doctor's voice barking orders. Outside, the crowd pressed forward. I could hear the flash of phones like gunfire. Somewhere, a reporter was already broadcasting. Breaking news. Edward Watson, presumed dead, has just been found alive mid-funeral after a child claimed he was breathing. I wanted to tell them it wasn't a miracle. It was mercy. The mercy of a small voice refusing to be silenced. As they wheeled me toward the ambulance, sunlight broke through the glass dome overhead. One piercing beam that fell directly on Joy. She tilted her head up, eyes closed, glowing in that light like an answer to a prayer I hadn't known I'd said. Her lips moved. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew them. "You're back." Machines beeped around me. Cold metal beneath me. The rhythm of life, mechanical and fragile. I watched the ceiling lights flicker past, one after another, like distant stars. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, slow but sure. Beep, beep, beep. For a moment, I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, the sound of being alive. In that stillness, I heard another voice, my father's this time, rough and warm. "The person who polishes your flaws might be the one who saves your life someday. So treat them all with kindness, son." I had laughed when he said that. I didn't laugh now, because it had come true. Not through an executive or investor, but through a child, the daughter of a woman who used to mop the marble floors of my empire. A child who believed when everyone else buried me. I don't remember when the paramedic leaned over me or when he said, "You're safe, Mr. Watson. Stay with us." But I remember whispering back, "I'm trying." I wasn't just fighting for breath anymore. I was fighting for meaning, for the chance to make everything right, to repay a debt that could never be repaid. The doors slammed shut. The siren wailed. The city moved around us, alive and frantic. Somewhere, Joy was still watching, teddy bear clutched to her chest. Somewhere, Elena was reeling, the empire she thought she'd inherited unraveling before her eyes. Somewhere, the world was already spinning this into a headline. But none of that mattered. Not anymore. All that mattered was that one small voice, the one that refused to let the silence win. As the ambulance sped through the streets, I stared at the oxygen mask fogging with every breath and realized something simple, terrifying, and beautiful. I had been given back my life, not by doctors, not by science, not by money, but by faith. By a child's impossible, unshakable faith. I closed my eyes, the sound of the siren fading behind the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound felt like a promise, a second chance, a new beginning. The first thing I heard was beeping. Slow, steady, mechanical. It sounded distant at first, like the echo of a dream I wasn't ready to leave. Then came the smell, antiseptic, sharp and sterile. My eyelids felt like they were glued shut. When I finally forced them open, the world swam into focus, a blur of white light, chrome edges, and movement. I was alive. The ceiling lights moved in rhythmic intervals, the same kind you find in emergency wards. I tried to lift my hand, but a wire tugged at my wrist. Another line snaked into my arm. Oxygen hissed softly beside me. For a long moment, I just lay there, watching the green pulse on the monitor trace the shape of my heartbeat. Fragile, stubborn, real. Every rise and fall felt like defiance. Then came the voices. Reporters. Camera shutters. A doctor's clipped commands. I turned my head, too fast, and the room blurred again. Through the glass partition, I saw chaos. Flashes of light. Journalists pressed against the corridor windows, security trying to hold them back. The air outside my room buzzed with disbelief. Pronounced dead for 6 hours. The child who said he was breathing. Medical miracle or malpractice. The words filtered through the haze, half heard, half understood. I should have been overwhelmed. Instead, I felt still, detached, as if the noise belonged to another man's life. Because in some way it did. The man they were talking about, the billionaire, the mogul, the heartless genius who built glass towers and buried his loneliness inside them, had died that morning. What woke up here was something else. Something quieter. A figure appeared at my bedside, Dr. Patel. His eyes were rimmed red, exhaustion shadowing his face. When he saw my gaze focus, relief broke through his composure. "Mr. Watson," he breathed. "Thank God. You're awake." I tried to speak, but my throat rasped like sandpaper. I coughed. "What happened?" He hesitated, glancing at the monitor. "You experienced what's known as a suspended cardiac state. Technically, your heart never completely stopped, but the rhythm became undetectable. It was triggered by an extreme allergic reaction to the sedatives you'd been given the night before." I blinked slowly. "Allergic reaction?" "Yes." He rubbed his temples. "Your vitals mimicked death. No pulse, no respiration detectable without invasive measures. The team followed protocol, but they didn't catch the anomaly. It was only temporary paralysis of certain autonomic responses." His jaw tightened. "It was a mistake that could have cost you your life. A mistake, or something worse." I remembered the cold glass, the taste of metal, the fading light before the darkness. Then Elena's voice at the funeral, sharp and impatient, cutting through prayers. "Let's proceed." I met his eyes. "You're sure it was an accident?" He hesitated, too long. "That's what we're investigating." That pause said everything. As he spoke, fragments of the past hours drifted through my fogged memory. The thunder of footsteps, Joy's voice piercing through the dark, the lid creaking open. "Where are they?" I croaked. "Who?" "Mary." "Joy." Dr. Patel's expression softened. "They haven't left the waiting area since you arrived. They refused to. I'll send them in." He left, and for a moment, I was alone again, surrounded by machines that hummed like steady ghosts. My mind drifted back into the darkness I'd floated through earlier. That strange, infinite calm beyond the edge of breathing. There had been no light, no tunnel, just weightlessness. For a long while, I thought I'd finally escaped the endless noise, the expectations, the guilt. It was peaceful, frighteningly peaceful, like falling asleep in warm water. But then, I heard a voice. Soft, familiar. "You said you weren't ready to go yet." I'd wanted to answer, to ask who it was, but the words never came. Only warmth. And then, far away, her scream. "He's not dead." That's when I'd fought my way back. The door clicked softly. I turned my head, slower this time, and there they were. Mary, still in her dark dress, her eyes swollen but shining. And beside her, Joy, holding that same teddy bear, its fur matted from tears. The second she saw me, she froze, her little fingers tightening around its paw. Then she whispered, almost in disbelief, "He's really awake." Mary covered her mouth, a sob breaking free as she rushed forward. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, clutching my hand. "You scared us all half to death." I tried to smile, but my lips trembled. Seems. I almost returned the favor. Joy crept closer, the bear pressed against her chest. She stood by the edge of my bed, studying my face with the intensity of someone twice her age. Then quietly she said, "I told them you were sleeping." Her words hit me harder than any medical explanation. "You did," I rasped. How did you know, Joy?" She looked at me, wide-eyed, fearless, and said softly, "Because you told me you weren't ready to go yet." The room went still. Mary frowned, confused. "Joy, when did he?" But I knew. I knew. That voice in the void. That whisper. It had been her. Tears burned behind my eyes before I could stop them. I reached out, my hand shaking, and she placed her tiny one inside mine. Her skin was warm, grounding. "Thank you," I whispered, "for hearing me." She smiled through her tears. "You heard me too." Mary pressed her lips together, fighting emotion. The monitor beeped steadily beside me, a rhythm syncing with the pulse I felt in Joy's hand. For the first time in years, I felt something unfiltered, no strategy, no agenda, just connection. Later, after they left to let me rest, I stared at the ceiling and let everything unravel inside me. The sedatives, the misdiagnosis, the sealed coffin, any of it could have been negligence, or something more deliberate. I thought of Elena again, her hunger for control. She'd had access. She'd insisted on signing off on the medical arrangements. But for the first time, vengeance didn't come naturally. I didn't feel the old fire, that cold satisfaction I used to get from plotting. I just felt humbled, fragile, grateful. I'd built my empire on precision, on dominance, on winning. But lying there, wrapped in tubes and tape, I realized how absurd it all was, how paper-thin life could be, and how the people we overlook can end up being the only ones who truly see us. The hospital became a fortress overnight. Security at every door. Reporters flooding the lobby. Police investigators interviewing doctors and nurses. I overheard fragments. Possible tampering with dosage. Pharmacy records missing. A rival company's consultant was in the facility. The words buzzed around me like angry insects. But I didn't care about motives yet. I cared about meaning. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Joy standing in that beam of light at the funeral. Her face tilted up, her expression fierce with belief. I'd spent decades surrounded by people who would sell their loyalty to the highest bidder. And yet it had been her, a child, who refused to give up on me. That truth settled deep inside me, heavier than any boardroom revelation. When Dr. Patel returned later that night, he carried the weariness of a man carrying more than just medical guilt. "The Board of Medicine will handle the investigation," he said quietly. "I'll cooperate fully. But I want you to know, Mr. Watson, this wasn't supposed to happen. None of it." I looked at him. Maybe it was. He frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe I wasn't supposed to die, but I was meant to see what death looked like. From the inside. Maybe I needed to lose everything that made me feel untouchable." He studied me, uncertain whether I was delirious or enlightened. Maybe both. A nurse entered soon after, holding a tablet. "Mr. Watson, there's something you might want to see." On the screen was a news feed, every channel looping the same footage. The clip began with the stillness of the funeral hall, then Joy's small figure rising among the mourners, her voice trembling but sure. "Stop! He's not dead." The camera zoomed in as chaos erupted, and when she reached the casket, her scream broke through like sunlight through storm clouds. Then the text overlays appeared. The miracle girl who saved a billionaire. Joy Amodi, the child who spoke life into the dead. Hashtag Billionaire Awakening trends worldwide. I watched speechless. Millions of strangers had turned our moment, our raw, sacred moment, into spectacle. But beneath the noise, something beautiful shimmered. People weren't mocking it. They were moved. Comment sections filled with stories. Nurses sharing near-death recoveries. Parents thanking God. Strangers writing. Maybe miracles still happen. For once, the internet wasn't a battlefield. It was a choir. When the nurse left, I turned the tablet off and stared at the dark reflection of my own face on the screen. The man who stared back wasn't the one who'd built glass towers and counted victories in millions. He looked older, humbler, but also freer. Somewhere in the background, the news anchor's voice still echoed faintly through the hallway. Sources confirm Edward Watson's condition is stable. He's expected to make a full recovery. The world watches as the man once presumed dead awakens to life again, thanks to the bravery of one little girl. I closed my eyes, letting the words settle. That night, when the hallway finally quieted and the machines hummed softly beside me, I whispered into the stillness. I don't know why I was given this chance, but I'll make it count. Somewhere beyond the hospital glass, the city lights flickered like 1,000 beating hearts. And in that glow, I could almost hear Joy's laughter, light unguarded, like an echo of the life waiting for me beyond this room. I smiled to myself, my voice barely a breath. "She told them I was sleeping," I murmured. And maybe she was right. Because now, for the first time in years, I was awake. The world slowed down after the headlines stopped screaming. 2 weeks had passed since the day Joy's voice shattered the silence of my funeral. The chaos that followed, the sirens, the media frenzy, the investigations, had dissolved into the steady rhythm of hospital life. For the first time in years, my days had no meetings, no deadlines, no board members. Just recovery, just stillness. And yet, the quiet wasn't empty. It was full of new faces, new thoughts, new meanings. Every morning, Mary brought Joy to my room before visiting hours officially began. She'd knock softly, peek in with a conspiratorial grin, and whisper. She insisted on coming early again. Joy would burst in right after, clutching her worn teddy bear and a sketchbook she now carried everywhere. She'd climb onto the couch beside my bed, legs swinging, eyes bright with curiosity. To her, this sterile hospital room wasn't a place of sickness. It was a playground of questions. Does your arm hurt when they change the tube? Do you dream about the same place where you went when you were asleep? Why does everyone whisper when you're around? I'd smile, sometimes laugh. Maybe they think I'll fall back asleep if they talk too loud. She'd frown thoughtfully, then shake her head. No, you're wide awake now. She said it with such certainty, it silenced any lingering doubt in me. Mary, on the other hand, was still trying to process everything. I'd often catch her sitting quietly by the window while Joy and I talked, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her uniform. One morning, as Joy colored beside me, I said, You've barely smiled in days, Mary. Still worried I'll turn into a ghost again. She managed a small laugh. After what happened, sir, I don't think anything could surprise me anymore. Eddie, I corrected gently. You've earned the right to drop the sir. She looked startled, then grateful. Eddie, then. Thank you. I studied her for a moment. The lines under her eyes, the calm endurance she carried. You held everything together when the world thought I was gone. Her voice softened. I just did what anyone would do. No, I said quietly. Not everyone would have stayed. Her eyes glistened. Joy wouldn't leave. She kept saying you'd wake up. I had to believe her. That, right there, was the strange truth of it, the bond between them. Between her faith and Joy's knowing. Between my own silence and the voice that had pulled me back. As days passed, the doctors called my recovery miraculous. They still ran tests, scanning for damage, but my heart was strong. I was walking again, breathing without tubes. One afternoon, while Joy watched cartoons, Dr. Patel visited. He gave me the last report, clean results across the board, then hesitated at the door. Mr. Watson, he said softly, we've closed the investigation on the sedative mix-up. It wasn't deliberate, just a chain of procedural negligence. Still, it shouldn't have happened. I nodded. And my family? He frowned. They've been calling non-stop. Especially your sister. She seems eager to discuss your estate. I gave a short, humorless laugh. Of course she is. That night, I called my lawyer. When my sister, Clara, learned that my will had been read during the period I was presumed dead, and that she'd been excluded from most of it, she erupted publicly. The tabloids devoured every word of her outrage. He was never generous, not even in death, she'd declared to some journalist. If he'd valued family, maybe someone would have cared he was gone. Hearing it hurt more than I'd expected. She wasn't wrong, not entirely. I'd shut everyone out long before the coffin closed. I'd thought solitude was control. But now I saw it for what it was, fear in expensive disguise. I didn't fight her claims. I simply rewrote my will. This time, every line had meaning. Joy was there the afternoon I met with my lawyer again, sketching quietly at the corner table. When I finished dictating the new terms, she looked up and asked, "What's a will?" "It's a promise," I said. "Something you leave behind so people know what mattered to you." She tilted her head. Like when I told Mom she could have my teddy if I ever get another one. I smiled. Exactly like that. She thought for a moment. "Are you leaving something for the people who were nice?" "Yes," I said. "And for the ones who listened." She grinned, proud of the connection, and went back to coloring. That night, as the nurse dimmed the lights, I thought about what Joy had said. The people who listened. That was her gift, not some mystical intuition, not supernatural foresight, but a heart that heard. She noticed what others didn't. The tremble in a hand, the pauses in a sentence, the spaces where truth hides. I remembered the first day I met Mary, years ago, a flashback now that played vividly in my mind. My HR director had dismissed her resume before the interview. "She doesn't have the credentials for an executive household," he'd said. But something in her handwritten cover letter had caught my eye. Humility, yes, but also courage. When she walked into my office that day, she looked nervous but steady. "Why do you want this job?" I'd asked, barely looking up from her file. "Because I need it," she'd said simply. "And because I don't quit." That answer made me look up. Most people gave rehearsed speeches about loyalty, excellence, or vision. Mary gave me truth. That was enough. I hired her on the spot. Back then, I hadn't known she'd become more than an employee. That she'd become the quiet backbone of my home, raising her daughter in the same house that had long stopped feeling like one to me. Now, watching her laugh softly as Joy told a joke, I realized something humbling. All the loyalty I'd been searching for in corporate boardrooms had been right here, in the laughter of a child and the steadiness of her mother. So when I recovered fully and returned home, the first thing I did was make it official. Mary became head of household management, with a salary that let her move her family into one of the staff residences on the property. No longer just employees, but part of something I was finally learning to call family. When I told her, she covered her mouth, tears spilling over. "Eddie, I can't." "You can," I interrupted. "You've earned it." Joy squealed, hugging me tight. "See, Mom? I told you he's the nicest rich man ever." I laughed, really laughed, and it felt like breathing sunlight. Recovery wasn't just physical, it was emotional excavation. Every walk through the hospital gardens, every quiet dinner with Mary and Joy, unearthed a part of me I'd buried under success and cynicism. Joy started calling it heart training. She'd say, "You're teaching your heart to listen again." And she wasn't wrong. I found myself asking questions I'd never asked before. About her school, her favorite books, her drawings. She loved sketching houses, especially the ones she'd seen from bus windows, tilted, colorful, alive. "You like drawing homes?" I asked once. "Not homes," she said thoughtfully. "Hopes." That single word carved itself into me. So I created something new, the Joy Amodi Scholarship Fund, a foundation to sponsor children who showed hearts that hear. When I told her, she gasped, "You named it after me?" I smiled. "It was your voice that woke me up, Joy. This is my way of making sure that voice never fades." Mary cried silently beside her. Joy just hugged me, whispering, "Now more people will wake up too." And maybe that's what I wanted most, not to repay a miracle, but to multiply it. Weeks later, the day before I was discharged, I signed the final version of my new will. My lawyer read the closing lines aloud while I stared out the hospital window, the city glowing gold beneath the setting sun. "To those who seek wealth, I leave lessons. To those who seek love, I leave memory. But to the one who heard me when I could not speak, Joy Amodi, I leave a promise. She will always be the first to know." He looked up from the document. "Would you like to add anything, sir?" I smiled faintly. "No, that's enough." He nodded and left me with the silence, the good kind, the living kind. As the sun dipped lower, Mary and Joy came to say good night. Joy placed her teddy bear beside me on the bed. "For you," she said solemnly, "so you don't forget to dream." "I thought he was yours," I said. She grinned. "He says he wants to stay with you now." I laughed softly. "Then I'll take good care of him." Mary smiled through tears, brushing a hand over her daughter's curls. "Come on, Joy. Let's let him rest." As they turned to leave, I said quietly, "Mary." She stopped. "Thank you for raising her to listen." She smiled, eyes glimmering. "No, Eddie. Thank you for finally hearing." When they left, I lay back and held the teddy bear against my chest. The heart monitor hummed gently beside me, a steady beat in the quiet. I thought about the line in my will. The first to know. She had been the first. Not just to sense I was alive, but to remind me what life really was. And as I drifted to sleep, the sound of my heartbeat filled the room. No longer a fragile miracle, but a steady promise. Because hearts that hear don't just listen. They awaken. The first morning back home didn't feel real. The mansion I'd once built to intimidate stood quiet, bathed in early sunlight. The glass walls no longer reflected power. They reflected peace. Birds sang somewhere beyond the gates. The air smelled of dew and fresh paint. Even the marble floors, once cold beneath my shoes, seemed softer somehow, as if the house itself had exhaled after holding its breath for years. I paused in the doorway, taking it all in. Same walls, same art, same space, but the man walking through it wasn't the one who'd left it. When I was pronounced dead, the estate had been sealed, rooms locked, corridors silenced. Now, laughter echoed through the halls again. Joy's laughter. She ran ahead of me that morning, her small sneakers squeaking against polished floors. "Eddie, come see." They put flowers in the fountain. I followed her into the courtyard. Sure enough, floating among the water lilies were clusters of white daisies, her favorite. Mary stood nearby, watching with that soft smile she wore now, the one she no longer hid behind formality. It was her idea, she said when I joined her. She wanted to make the house smile again. Joy grinned proudly. It was too serious before. She was right. The house had always been too serious, too perfect, too still, too afraid of feeling human. I knelt beside her. "I think the house agrees with you." She giggled. "Then we'll change the flowers every year. New colors for new smiles." And just like that, without realizing it, she'd started a tradition. The weeks after my discharge were a quiet unraveling of everything that had once defined me. My company's board had been forced to reckon with itself. Investigators exposed the trail of manipulation. Rival executives who'd influenced medical decisions, trying to rush estate control before confirmation of my death. The irony? They'd been undone by their own haste. When the evidence surfaced, I didn't rage. I simply signed their resignations and walked away. I'd spent years believing control was the only language of survival. But now, I wanted something different, something alive. So I turned my focus outward. We transformed one of my subsidiaries into the Watson Foundation, dedicated to children's welfare and community learning programs. And the first project was Joy's idea, again. "We should help kids who feel invisible," she said one afternoon, coloring on my office floor. "Like how you felt when everyone thought you were gone." Her words cut through me, pure, unfiltered truth. So that's what we did. Within weeks, the Invisible No More initiative launched. Scholarships, art centers, and hospitals funded in her name. The press called it my redemption era. I called it breathing. Mary transitioned gracefully into her new role as head of household. She managed staff, organized events, even started a literacy program for employees' families. The house was no longer an island. It was alive, a place where people gathered without walking on eggshells. Sometimes, I'd catch her in the garden after dusk, watering the lilies by hand, humming softly. I'd stand at the balcony, listening, pretending I was just there to check the evening air. But the truth was simpler. I liked hearing her sing. There was peace in it, the kind I hadn't known I missed. She must have sensed my gaze one evening, because she looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "You don't have to watch from far away, you know." I chuckled, stepping down the path. Old habits die hard. "Then maybe," she said, eyes glinting in the twilight, "you should start growing new ones." And that was how it began. Not a romance declared, but a connection understood. Subtle, respectful, the kind that needed no grand gestures, only quiet presence. One afternoon, while clearing old files from my study, I found a sealed envelope, the letter I'd written years ago to be read after my death. Inside were cold words, legalistic, detached. To those concerned, I leave my assets with no further personal note. Legacy is built on logic, not emotion. I sat there for a long time, holding that line. Legacy is built on logic. How small it sounded now. How empty. So I tore it in half and wrote a new one. To whoever finds this, remember, legacy is not the buildings we raise, but the hearts that keep beating when ours stop. Measure wealth not by what you hold, but by who holds your hand. When I finished, I smiled, because that was Joy's handwriting in spirit, if not in ink. Sometimes at night, I'd remember how I used to live. The penthouse offices, the silent dinners, the glass decanter always half full, waiting for someone who'd never come. I'd look out over the city then, the glow of other people's lives flickering through their windows, and feel nothing. The heart monitor from the hospital sometimes echoed in my mind, that steady beep 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 reminding me how close I'd come to silence. And yet, I realized now, I'd been dead long before my body stopped. I'd been walking without rhythm, breathing without meaning, existing without hearing. Joy had changed that. Mary had nurtured it. Between them, they'd taught me something I'd never learned in a boardroom. How to live with a pulse that wasn't measured in profit. The estate evolved slowly. Mary filled the halls with soft light and warmth. The kitchen smelled of baking again. Staff who once whispered now laughed openly. And Joy, she turned my office into her idea corner. She covered the walls with sketches, some of flowers, others of people, and one large drawing of a heart surrounded by sound waves. "It's your heartbeat," she explained proudly. "See how it connects to ours?" I stared at it, moved. "That's beautiful, Joy." "It's what you taught me," she said. "Hearts talk to each other, even when we don't notice." I nodded, swallowing emotion. "They do." And maybe that was what it meant. The heartbeat as a metaphor for unseen bonds. For the invisible thread that connects us when words fall short. Spring came early that year. The first of Joy's annual flowers. Bright yellow tulips were planted around the fountain. Every petal looked like captured sunlight. On the morning of their bloom, we held a small gathering. Staff, neighbors, local reporters, nothing extravagant, just laughter and life. Mary stood beside me, wearing a simple lavender dress, her eyes reflecting the morning light. Joy danced around the fountain, her laughter carrying on the wind. For a moment, I just stood there, watching them, feeling the strange, quiet fullness that had replaced the old emptiness. We didn't need grand speeches. The silence itself said enough. Later that evening, as the guests left and dusk painted the sky, we settled on the terrace overlooking the garden. Joy lay curled up on a blanket between us, half asleep, clutching her teddy bear. The air was cool, carrying the scent of the tulips she'd planted. Mary poured tea into 2 cups, passing one to me. "She's growing fast," she said softly. "She's growing right," I corrected. She smiled, watching her daughter breathe peacefully. "She misses her father sometimes. But she's found something here. Someone." I turned to her, meeting her gaze. "And you?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "Maybe I have too." The words lingered between us, unspoken yet complete. The sky deepened to gold, then purple. Crickets began their chorus. In that fading light, I felt the world settle into balance. Joy stirred, murmured something in her sleep. Just one word. "Home." Mary brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face, smiling softly. "Yes, baby," she whispered. "Home." I looked at them, 2 souls who'd brought me back from silence, and realized that for all my fortune, this was the only wealth that mattered. As the sun sank below the horizon, I found myself tracing the pulse at my wrist. Strong, steady, alive. Once, I'd believed the heartbeat was proof of survival. Now I knew it was proof of connection. That every person we love, every voice that calls us back from the edge, keeps that rhythm going. I turned to Mary. "You know," I said quietly, Joy was right. She looked up. "About what?" I smiled, eyes fixed on the glowing horizon. "This house does smile now." She laughed softly. "Then I guess we did our job." I nodded. "No," I whispered. "You did more than that. You gave it a heart." The sun broke through one last time, a band of orange light stretching across the fountain, catching the tulips, glinting off the water. I breathed deeply, closing my eyes, feeling the warmth on my skin. This moment was life. No cameras, no applause, just us. And as the light faded, I thought of how far I'd come. From a coffin's silence to the laughter of a child, from isolation to love's quiet hum. The heartbeat in my chest synced with the world around me. Steady, present, heard. That night, before turning in, I wrote one last line in my journal, a reflection for the man I used to be. When I died, they buried a man who had everything. When I woke, I became a man who finally had something worth living for. It's strange how time softens even the sharpest memories. The sound of that church silence breaking, Joy's small voice cutting through the air like lightning, still echoes in my dreams, but now it feels less like terror and more like music. It's been 5 years since that day. 5 years since I woke up to chaos, to cameras, to disbelief, and to the softest whisper that brought me back. You said you weren't ready to go yet. Now, as I sit by the window of my study, no longer a fortress but a home, I can hear laughter spilling from the garden below. Joy is 12 now. Taller, louder, still with that spark that no one can quite explain. Mary is beside her, kneeling among the marigolds, her hair catching the late afternoon sun. They've both changed me more than they could ever know. The Joy of Life Foundation turned 5 this spring. We started it in a single rented office downtown, with 3 volunteers and a vision to help underprivileged children get access to healthcare, education, and emotional support. It began with Joy's story, how a little girl's heart heard what machines could not, and it grew into something far bigger. Today, there are branches in 4 cities. Scholarships, therapy programs, even mobile clinics in rural areas. The media calls it a miracle movement. I call it redemption in motion. Because every child we reach, every mother we help, feels like another pulse of that second heartbeat I was given. I still remember our first major fundraising gala. Joy had just turned 10. She stood on that stage in a pale blue dress, hands shaking slightly, and said into the microphone, "Sometimes, people stop listening to the world when it hurts too much." I think my heart just got louder. You could hear the audience sniffling, even the billionaire sponsors blinking back tears. I had to look away to steady myself. She didn't talk about miracles. She talked about listening, to people, to silences, to yourself. That was Joy, always finding the truth between the noise. But the journey wasn't without shadows. After my recovery, the investigation revealed everything we'd feared, and more. This suspended heartbeat had been caused not just by allergic reaction, but by negligence, maybe even tampering. One of my board rivals had bribed a hospital contact to rush the declaration. The motive was obvious: power, control the company. They never succeeded. By the time the legal dust settled, I was a different man. I resigned as CEO and handed the reins to someone I trusted. For the first time, I stopped building empires and started building lives. And when the press asked me, "Mr. Watson, what changed?" I simply said, "A child reminded me what being alive means." Mary has been the quiet backbone of everything since. I promoted her officially to Director of Household Management 2 years ago, though in truth, she became part of my family long before that title existed. Her wisdom grounds me in ways money never could. She's the one who makes sure I eat breakfast, the one who leaves fresh flowers in Joy's study, the one who reminds me to take breaks when the foundation's weight feels too heavy. There's something between us, something soft and wordless. It isn't romance in the cinematic sense. It's connection, forged in shared battles and quiet faith. Sometimes, when our eyes meet across the dinner table, I feel a warmth that no empire could ever match. We don't name it. We don't need to. Joy, on the other hand, is pure sunlight. Her laughter fills rooms that once echoed only with my footsteps. She's clever, curious, and somehow always aware when I drift into old memories. She'll just appear beside me and say, "You're thinking too much again." Then she'll rest her hand on mine, grounding me in the present. A few months ago she asked, "Eddie, when I heard your heart that day, was it magic?" I smiled and shook my head. "No, Joy, it was love. The pure kind, the one that doesn't ask for proof." She thought about it for a moment, then said, "Then maybe love is just the world's heartbeat." That line stayed with me. It's now engraved on the foundation's plaque. The anniversary of my funeral that wasn't comes quietly every year. We don't make it grand. No press, no spectacle. Just the 3 of us. We visit the chapel where it happened. The staff there have long since replaced the cracked marble tiles from that chaotic day, but I can still see the faint outline of where the casket stood. Mary always brings lilies. Joy brings 1 red rose and 1 white. This year, as the sun filtered through the stained glass, I stood in silence, hand resting over my chest, feeling that steady rhythm that nearly ceased once upon a time. Joy slipped her hand into mine. "You're different now," she said. "How so?" I asked. "You listen with your heart. You didn't used to." She was right. The man I was before, the one buried in work, drowning in solitude, had gone quiet inside long before my body followed. My real death had begun years earlier. I just hadn't noticed. That day, I made a vow to never let my heart go unheard again. Later that evening, back at the estate, we held our quiet ritual. Joy helped Mary set up candles by the garden pond. I brought out the envelope I'd written earlier that morning. Inside was a note and a single sprig of white jasmine. Mary looked at me curiously. "Who's it for?" "Her," I said, nodding toward Joy. "For the little girl who heard my heartbeat when no one else did." I left the envelope on her nightstand after she fell asleep. She found it the next morning, and I heard her soft gasp through the hallway. She came running into my study, eyes wet, holding the note against her chest. She didn't say anything, just hugged me tight. And in that quiet moment, I realized those 3 words, "He's not dead," had not just saved a life. They'd rewritten it. Sometimes I think about the other version of me, the one who might have stayed buried that day. Would the world have missed me? Would my empire have mourned longer than a few news cycles? I doubt it. But now, I see how a life's value isn't measured in wealth or titles. It's measured in the hearts it touches. The Joy of Life Foundation has reached over 50,000 children since we began. Every single one of them is a reminder that compassion can echo louder than ambition. A few months ago, a journalist interviewed me for a feature titled "The Man Who Lived Twice." He asked, "Mr. Watson, what's the most important lesson death taught you?" I answered without hesitation, "That living isn't about how long your heart beats, it's about who hears it." He smiled, maybe not understanding the full depth of it. But I did, because I still remember that darkness, that soundless void where time stopped, and then that distant, desperate voice calling me back. "He's breathing," the words that pulled light back into me. Tonight, the 3 of us sit on the veranda, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The estate feels alive now, gardens blooming, laughter echoing, the hum of cicadas in the dusk. Joy leans against me, her head on my arm. Mary brings us tea, her smile soft and knowing. For a moment, I close my eyes and just listen. Not to the world's noise, but to its pulse. The rhythm of laughter, the whisper of wind, the steady beating beneath my ribs. That's the legacy those 3 words left behind. Not fame, not fortune, but a reminder that to live is to connect, to feel, to be heard. And as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in gold, Joy says softly, "Do you think hearts can really talk?" I look at her, at Mary, at the glowing world before us, and smile. "They can," I say, "but only if we learn to listen."